first husband, Isaac Franklin, slave trader.
Welcome you all to the talk today that's going to be given to us by Seth Skiles. He is from Charleston, West Virginia. He is a master's student at Belmont in church music. He's also a historical interpreter here at the mansion as well. And last summer we received an artifact from descendants of Adelicia's sister. Not directly the Acklen family, but one of her sister's descendants. And it was a hand-bound music book that she had copied when she was in school at the Nashville Female Academy. And it is it is hand-drawn, even the staffs are hand-drawn. We had it on display in the case back here behind you. So I'll invite you after it's over to take a look at that. We also have another later music book of hers. This is a much more traditional one, and it is ladies during this period acquired sheet music. Y'all probably don't even remember sheet music. Acquired, this is individual songs that were published as just one piece of music. And then they would collect these number of pieces of sheet music, and they would have it bound at one of the book binderies here in town. And we have one that is Mrs. A. Franklin, so that's when she was married to this man right here, Isaac Franklin. It's a much more traditional, typical parlor music now. But we asked Seth to talk about this sort of interesting insight into music practices in early Nashville school.
Folks, how's it going? Can you hear me okay? Okay. So, again, my name is Seth Skiles. I'm a historic interpreter here at Belmont Mansion, but I'm also a master's student in the music department here at Belmont. And I've been honored to have been asked to speak about this great artifact that we have here on Belmont's campus. So before we talk about this music book, let me talk to you a little bit about Adelicia Acklen's early years when this was produced, and to kind of tell you what the setting was here in Nashville, what she would have encountered here, and what she would have encountered while she was studying the Nashville Female Academy. So Adelicia Acklen was born on March the 15th, 1817, which is today. She would have been 201 years old today. Her father was named Oliver Bliss Hayes. And Mr. Hayes was born in South Hadley, Massachusetts, and he was educated in New England, very smart man. He moved to Nashville in 1808 in the early part of that century and became known here as a successful lawyer at that time. Now, Oliver was later ordained as a Presbyterian minister, so religion was very important in the Hayes household. Adelicia's mother was named Sarah Hightower. She was born into a high socialite family here in the Nashville area. And when she and Oliver married, they married south of here in Williamson County, so just right down the road from here. So because of Oliver's background, education was considered very, very important in Adelicia's life while she was growing up. And she was one of 8 children in that family. Now, to show you what Nashville kind of appeared like during this time, I've put some then and now pictures of a couple places in town here. So on the top, you'll see this image right here. This was called Market Street. So this was today's 2nd Avenue. So if you take like Broadway and go all the way down to the river, it's the street right before 1st Avenue along the river. So lots of marketing would have been done here. This is how it appears today. Also, if you come out to the river, this was the riverfront. So this would have been 1st Avenue today. You'll see these still storefronts along the river, still here, right down there today. So the Cumberland River was very, very important in Nashville's early days. Not lots of people and economy and goods were coming through here on ships. Nashville wasn't much more than a frontier outpost on this bend of the river. But when Adelicia was born, that generation here kind of boomed the city to what we know of as of today, the center of Tennessee's culture and tourism and economy. It's here in Nashville. So when Oliver Hayes comes to Nashville in the early 1800s, he becomes one of the owners for the prestigious Nashville Female Academy, which existed from 1816 to 1861. And this was a very, very high-class college for young women, kind of like a girls' finishing school. Young ladies would go here to learn to become more socially aware and be ready for society as women at that time. Now, Oliver was also on the board of trustees for the Nashville Female Academy. He was also very highly involved with its operations here, and Adelicia did attend here. And in the document called the Nashville City and Business Directory for the City of Nashville, it was published in 1859, so after Adelicia's time. It gives us a good view of what the school looked like at that time. So here's some engravings and paintings of that surrounding countryside. The Nashville Female Academy's facility sat on 6 acres in the western side of town, kind of southwestern part of Nashville at that time. There were many porticos and corridors along this building, covered pavements, beautiful space. A lot of the time in the summer months and the spring months, the ladies would come out, spend time outside on the grounds here. Now, the buildings were heated with steam, and they were lighted with gas, which were luxuries for that time. And their academic year was from September to June, kind of like our college academic year today. And according to Mark Brown, this is the current location of the YMCA in town today. So in this same document, published in 1859, the tuition for these girls is broken down. And musical activities are broken down in this document. So music was a very important part of the Nashville Female Academy. The girls were charged for several different musical activities throughout the year, including vocal or instrumental piano or lessons. If they were to have 3 lessons a week per year, that would have been $60. The use of the piano to practice per year was $10. The use of the guitar was $5. To sing in one of the college choirs in the academy was another $10 a year. And to use and practice a harp was a whopping $100 per year. So quite a change today. So there was an author in 2015 named Erica Joy Rumbley, and if you are kind of aware of the academic music scene, there's a very important music journal called the American Music Journal that a lot of professors use for research. And Ms. Rumbley published a very helpful article for our meeting today in this publication, and it was titled "Ornamental Music and Southern Bells at the Nashville Female Academy." So based on this article, we have several awesome bits of information that tells us about musical activities here. Now, the Nashville Female Academy's 1855 motto is going to give you an idea of where the emphasis was in this school. The motto was, "The lady first and the scholar next." So academic studies were a little bit beneath more etiquette studies for that time for these young ladies. Music and other ornamental studies were very important at that time. Now, throughout particularly the southern United States in the mid-1800s, there were very frequently published etiquette manuals or ladies' journals published for social refinement, telling young women how to behave, how to dress, how to speak, very common during that time. And music and the arts were held to a high degree in the domestic setting. By advancing beyond rudimentary music instruction and employing highly trained music faculty who taught these girls technical and artistic skills, the Nashville Female Academy was able to emerge as a leader in its field. So lots of professional musicians coming to this facility to teach during this time. Now, let's talk about some more specific lessons these girls would have. If the girls sang, they would have vocal lessons. Their vocal repertoire advanced by years. So as the girls got older, their repertoire became more difficult. By their graduation, the girls were singing pieces from Italian opera and from several different classical composers at that time. However, most of their vocal songs they were singing were of high religious and moral quality, because there was a large religious component to this facility here when the girls were studying here. If the girls played the piano repertoire consisted of many dances, sentimental works like parlor music, and we'll talk about parlor music here in a little while, and also some classical pieces with technical difficulty. At the time, piano duets were very common. The girls would sit together, and it was a chance to collaborate with others in parlor and domestic settings at that time. Very showy pieces. Now, interestingly, even though there was classical music studied at this institution, the Nashville Female Academy's music department was geared more toward popular music and parlor music, popular taste at that time, more accepted by society in the United States. Also, a large component for these girls in their artistic endeavors here was dance. Now, dancing, enormously popular in Nashville in the first half of the 1800s. In town here, there were many instructors, plentiful. Many schools taught girls and young men how to dance and to kind of how to carry themselves at social events at this time. At the time, there were many balls, country dances, and cotillions that were held here. Now, a cotillion is a type of dance that was more for debutante young women, meaning a young lady would be in training, to be in school, to be accepted for society. They would come to these cotillion dances, and they would kind of be presented as young women at that time. A little bit like the story of My Fair Lady, a little bit like that. Many of these dances, they were brought over from Europe, and one of them was enormously popular, and that was called the waltz. But the waltz was very, very controversial in the United States when first brought here because of the close contact it required when dancing with your partner and the euphoria gained from spinning around and around and around. So because of this natural occurrence, many people thought the waltz could lead to promiscuous behavior at the time. So close eye on this dance from adults at that time, watching young people dance this. Now, it's important to keep in mind, these girls at the National Female Academy, they were not preparing for professional music careers in music education or performance. They simply were preparing to beautify their environments based on where they were living and in the domestic settings and social classes at that time. Because of these very strong musical inclinations at this school, the musical foundations were laid for future Nashville academia. So the Nashville Female Academy closed when Fort Donelson fell in the Civil War. Early in the war in 1861, a product of that, when the Civil War had concluded, was Ward Seminary, formed in 1865. And not long after that, Belmont College was formed here in 1890, 3 years after Adelicia's death. Those two facilities merged in 1913 and now has evolved right out here at Belmont University, a place of rich musical endeavors today. So, let's talk about parlor music. Adelicia, during her time living here as a young lady in Nashville, was probably influenced a lot by parlor music as well as her school studies here. So, parlor music was performed by middle-class citizens in the home. That was kind of the market to where this was directed. It consisted of vocal and keyboard music, very popular in 19th century America. Because of this new kind of fad called popular music, sheet music became mass-produced. Many companies popped up all over the United States producing sheet after sheet after sheet of music and sold in sheet music stores, which had never really been in existence before until this time. So this popular parlor music was overtaken by the invention of the phonograph. And this was a pretty significant change in the American music scene as a whole in our country, because our American citizens changed from music makers in the home to music listeners because of the influx of recorded music at that time. So it was not too common by the end of the 1800s to be making as much music yourself, like this parlor music. Also, because of Adelicia's religious background here. Again, her father was an ordained Presbyterian minister. She was influenced by church music here. Now, Adelicia attended the Presbyterian church downtown, called the Downtown Presbyterian Church. It still is in existence today. There's 2 columns that stand right outside on the front. If you drive downtown someday, you'll see it down there. The pew that Adelicia sat in every Sunday during those services is still in existence, and it is marked to show you where that is in that church. Let me skip forward and we'll talk about that. Okay, so this is how it looked in the early 1900s. In the sanctuary today, it is patterned after an Egyptian style of decoration. Okay, now I'm behind my slides here, so I'm going to go back and show you some things. So this image on this engraving on the left here, this shows you what a typical scene in a home would be like playing parlor music. Everyone would be gathered around their piano or some sort of keyboard instrument. Usually women would play at that time, and the children would gather around and see images of the room we are sitting in today. This is Belmont's Grand Salon during Adelicia's time here. And this room where we're sitting became the kind of the room for music making in this mansion. We'll talk about that in a little while. Let me go back one more here. So, another image of a type of dance at that time, Southern dances in Nashville. We talked about cotillions, ladies being presented for society, and these are different types of pianos at that time. The leading brand of pianos during this time period was called Knabe, Knave, kind of like the Steinway brand of that century at that time. Okay? All right, we're going to move on. So, let's talk about music here in this mansion, and then we'll get to this actual music book. So, where we're sitting now, again called the Grand Salon, this was added to this original mansion. So the mansion was finished in 1853 as a summer home for Adelicia Acklen and her second husband, Joseph Acklen, from Alabama. So this room wasn't here. So if you were sitting here in 1853, you would have been sitting outside. And if you had an aerial view of the house, it looked like the shape of a U. In 1859, Adelicia wants to expand. She hires an architect named Adolphus Hyman to come in, design this grand staircase, unfortunately under renovation today, you can't look over there, and extends the house back this way. So in 1859, 1860 when this was completed, this Grand Salon became the primary entertainment spot in this home. So this is where the musical instruments were, where dances would have occurred and musical performances would have occurred in here. So, let's get to the music book now. So we acquired at the mansion this music book this past summer, and it is on display right back here. If you look with me back here, when we finish today, walk back on here on this pedestal here, and it's open so you can see what it looks like in there. So this is a hand-copied and hand-sewn document by Adelicia during her time living in Nashville and attending the Nashville Female Academy. Now, she's dated this as June the 3rd, 1833, so she would have been 16 years old. We could take some lessons of our handwriting today from Adelicia's writing here. So, also throughout a couple places in this book here, she also has some doodling on the staffs here, on the staves. So probably when she was transcribing all this music, she may have gotten bored and started to doodle on the sides here. Okay, now at the time there was an instrument, kind of like a tool, probably about this big, that was for writing sheet music. So it had, if you had an instrument like this, on the top of it, it had some sort of fixture like a claw, like this, with 5 different points on there. You would dip that in ink and you would drag it across your page. And that is what formed the staves here, instead of drawing them freehand. Yeah, interesting tool. Much helpful in drawing them like this at that time. Okay. Now, in Adelicia's book, most of the pieces in this book she has transcribed are instrumental marches, dance pieces, and folk songs from basically Ireland, Scotland, and England at that time. Now, Adelicia was very highly influenced by Queen Victoria in the Victorian age in England, but these pieces date before that. Okay, a lot of them date from the 1700s. Now, this type of work was common for schooling for these girls. Along with music instruction and learning how to produce music, the girls were also taught and well-versed in music literacy. How to read notes, how to notate them, what the different stylistic markings were about note heads and staffs and things like that. Okay. Again, a lot of these songs, pieces in this book are from the 1700s, and they are written in several modes. Now, a mode is just a fancy word for a variation on the melodic scale. And it's if you have a tonic pitch, a main pitch in your scale, a mode is just kind of just a different way of writing that scale, adjusting the pitches and making a little bit of different sound. Now, they have official names: Dorian, Mixolydian, Lydian, Phrygian, Locrian, Aeolian, and Iolian modes. Okay, so a couple of different modes are present in this. And when we think of Celtic music, if you think of something like river dance or different traditional Irish jigs, they are a lot of times in a minor mode, sound a little bit darker. And I'm going to play one for you here in a little while. Okay, so also in this book, she has hand-bound these pages, okay? So, and I've tried to zoom in on you so you can see the binding here. So, over and under and over and under, all the way to bind these large pages. And it's a pretty large document. It's just not like our pages today. Pretty big pages. Also, the pieces in this book are pretty short, because it was common at the time to notate the melody of these dance tunes, and then your pianist or whoever was playing them for your dances was required to improvise on that melody, kind of like jazz today. And so you couldn't just play the melody, because the piece would be over in 10 seconds. You had to go longer and longer, have a good idea about keys and key changes and how to improvise to make those dances prolonged. Okay? So we're going to look at some examples in this book. And before we do that, I've put a couple of images up here so you can see her handwriting. She had kind of different calligraphy type pens, it looks like, to write the titles of these pieces, and different ornamental designs. You can also see her directions and tempo markings here as well. Okay? So, the first tune we're going to look at is called O'er the Moor Among the Heather. This dates from about 1757, so long before her time. It is called a reel, and there are 4 different types of dances in this book from those countries that I mentioned to you: Ireland, England, and Scotland. They were called reels, jigs, strathspeys, or waltzes at the time. So, O'er the Moor Among the Heather is a reel, again published in 1757 in the major mode. And most of these examples about these specific tunes that I'm going to tell you about today are from the traditional tune archive. So, nice resource on the computer today. So I'm going to play the melody of this piece, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So this is O'er the Moor Among the Heather. About 3 more times, okay? So, short little melodies. I'm not going to improvise for you today. I'm just going to leave that up to your imagination, okay? So, And if you want to put these up here, you can follow along with me on these first lines, okay? The next tune we're going to look at in here is called Jenny Dang the Weaver. This is a Scottish piece, and the word dang here it means to beat. So this is supposed to be sung by a jealous husband at that time, okay? From Scotland, this is called a contra dance. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the term contra dance. Okay, a couple of you. So, contra dances were more livelier, meant for partners, kind of like a line dance. You would line up in two long lines, and then you would advance toward the front. There would be a collar up here, kind of where if we were having a dance in this room, there would be two long lines this way, two long lines this way, and there would be a collar up here. Okay. This is also from 1757. So from the same time period, also in the major mode. Okay? So this is Jenny Dang the Weaver. The next one is called I Have a Wife of My Ain, and this is an Irish tune, older than the first two. This is from 1734. So when Adelicia was transcribing this, she was transcribing almost a century-old tune here. Again, from Ireland, this was a country dance, a little bit more ruddier at that time, more primitive Irishmen would have danced to this before it came over to the United States. This is in the Dorian mode, so it's going to sound a little bit darker, more Celtic here. This is I Have a Wife of My Ain. So our last little tune here we're going to look at before we move on is called The Hunters of Kentucky. And where is this from? The United States. We're going to move out of Europe. We're going to come to the home turf here. So again, from the United States, another contra dance. When this was popular was around the time of 1850. So when Adelicia transcribed this, this was just becoming popular in the United States. Another more primitive tune. It sounds here a little bit more Americanized here, and it also is in the major mode. So this is The Hunters of Kentucky. So, 4 little snippets to give you an idea of what's in this book. Many similar things in here. So, as we continue on, musical traditions are still continuing at this very geographic spot today. Because of the rich musical heritage here, from Adelicia and her daily occurrences at the Nashville Female Academy, that those musical foundations were laid on this Belmont, our beautiful mountain. And if you haven't partaken in some of the offerings at Belmont University in the music department, I encourage you to do so because they are very well varied and very high quality down there. Okay. So to conclude here, then I'm going to ask if you have any questions. Miss Liz Jones is going to come forward. Liz Jones is an office worker in the Belmont Mansion, but she is also a classical vocal performance major. And Miss Liz is going to sing a song called Buds and Flowers, written by Oliver Shaw. And this particular piece is assumed that Adelicia Acklen may have sung for her first husband, Isaac Franklin, before they were married. So here's Adelicia. Here is Isaac Franklin. So imagine her singing this to him. It sounds very 19th century. And then we'll take some questions after this. This is Buds and Flowers with Miss Liz. Okay. Thanks, folks, for coming today. Is there any questions about the information presented here today? None? Okay. Got a question?
Yeah, did Adelicia write any of her own music or come up with any of her own tunes?
Not that we know of. Not that we know of. She wasn't a composer. She just was a transcriber. Okay. She may have arranged her own pieces because, again, she had just those little melodic inserts there. But she may have arranged some and improvised some, but not any evidence that she composed on her own. Okay. Anybody else? Well, folks, when you leave, before you get your convo credit, walk down here and see these music books. There's also a music book on display that was in Adelicia's collection later, and her name is engraved on the cover there. Thanks, folks, for coming today.
A little connection strip of property. It's Belmont Boulevard and the apartments. And then once you get to that past McAfee, that street there, then she has another 100 acres there. That was called Montreal. Bye. Good night. Thank you. Good to see you. Good work. I know. Always try to. Well, we should put that on the website because we just published a book and it shows sort of the outline of the property. There were some outtakes, some out parcels as they call them. It wasn't a complete perfect square, and she bought it over a period of 10, 15 years.
Now, do you know what, you should say around like the Brunswick City area, do you know what its purpose was or what the anything was?
It was fields, just fields. That was the garden farm. So they raised corn, wheat, oats to feed the livestock. That's where the gardens were, the vegetable gardens and all that type of stuff. So that's what was all over there. And before the Civil War, that's where the mule barn was, and the chicken houses, and the turkey houses. And,
I could never figure out what.
yeah, sort of that flat area just past McAfee, that area there, that's where all of that was. And then it was all torn down in the 1st of December.
And did any of these roads exist in this property?
Grady White, 12th Avenue and 21st. That existed.
And I guess Belmont Boulevard
Was not here. Belmont Boulevard was a little wagon road that connected the two properties. Belmont Boulevard, and when Adelicia sold the property in 1887. I mean, yeah, 1887. They were already developing Roteby, her father's property, what's the Music Row area today. So it was just now being developed. And they were getting ready to put a streetcar line out, and so she sold all of it. And when she sold all of this property, they put in a subdivision, and Belmont Boulevard became part of the streetcar line. It was all put in around 1890. The streetcar came out here in the summer of 1891. They laid the streetcar line out what's Music Row today. They made a little curve, went around this property, and then went down what's just on the other side of the Belmont Hall. There's a street there called West Belmont Circle. That became now what is, in front of the library. That street went all the way through and connected with Williamsburg. And so, and that's where the streetcar line, and it went on down Belmont Boulevard, where it curved around on Belmont Boulevard. And then that started all the development.
Sounds good to me. I would.
She sold the property, and then Lawrence started selling off the property. Her family, her brothers and sisters were selling off all of the Music Row area. Well, no, by her request, he left nothing to her. Yeah, because, he says in his will, at my daughter's request, he receives no property, no money, no nothing. She is amply provided for us. She's already ready. So, yeah.
I've always wondered that. Also, what is the basement?
We wish we knew.
Oh, you don't?
Okay. 8,500 square feet in the basement. There would have been a kitchen down there. There would have been what they call the scullery, which is a washroom. There would have been a laundry down there. There may have been a summer dining room down there. There was a summer dining room that you eat in the summertime when it was so hot. There would have been wine cellar down there. There would have been storage rooms, larder rooms as they were called. Today we call a root cellar. That would have all been in the basement. 8,500 square feet in the basement. Thank you.
And one more.
Where did she die at? 5th Avenue Hotel in New York City.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On a shopping trip in 1987. She was shopping for 30 for free. She was living in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Yeah, this is the best. All right.
Was she running the place or
What, the 5th Avenue Hotel?
Washington, D.C.?
No, she wasn't running the place yet.
Do you know where the...
Jennifer, do you have the condo scanner?
Hello and welcome to Mystery Us. This is Anthony Pratt, your host for Mystery Us. And today our most intriguing guest is Mr. Mark Brown, Executive Director for the Belmont Mansion Museum. Welcome to Mystery Us, Mark.
Thank you.
Now, Mark, you've been described as not only the man behind the magic at Belmont Mansion, but the magic itself. You have been Executive Director for more than 20 years. How did you come to be the caretaker and presenter of this beautiful house?
Well, it actually started when I was a student here, and I went to Belmont and started volunteering here when I was a student, and decided I really enjoyed working with house museums. So I dropped my minor in education and picked up a minor in business administration, and then went on to graduate school in historic preservation and house museum administration.
Very cool. And what is this whole journey at this point meant to you? What has it been in your life?
It has been a very interesting journey. I've worked at 3 historic sites in my career. This has certainly probably been the most fulfilling because it's it's the combination of a wonderful story and a wonderful piece of architecture and a fascinating collection. I enjoy art, so she was an art collector. I enjoy women's studies, and so she certainly was a fascinating woman. And I enjoy what the French call la petite history, and that's the history of sort of everyday life. And I think house museums have a wonderful way of being able to give people insights into a life in another time, in another period.
Absolutely. Now, what does the process of bringing this magnificent historic mansion to life entail?
Well, it takes a lot of research. That's sort of, you begin your basic process with research and more research and more research. Primary source materials, secondary source materials, descriptions, that type of thing, and then you figure out how to organize that research in a meaningful way, and then you start with research and on the building itself, structural analysis, paint analysis, and all of that, the surviving architectural elements, the ghost of architectural elements that's missing, and you then start organizing all of that into a coherent package in trying to understand how each individual space was built, put together, decorated, and changed over the years. So it's looking at letters, it's looking at newspaper articles, all of that, and then you have the original surviving objects. And what do they say about not only the place, and how they were used in the rooms and the space, about the person who collected and chose those objects, and how can you fill out the broader picture with one or two objects that, say, for example, that was on the dining room table. What else would have been on the table of the same type and that type of thing, and start using a curatorial eye to figure out how else to complement the original objects.
Now, Acklen Hall, or Belmont Mansion, which was also referred to as Belmonte, Beautiful Mountain.
Yes, it's spelled 2 or 3 different ways.
Right.
By Adelicia herself.
Okay.
So.
And this was the home of Adelicia Acklen and Colonel Joseph Acklen. I guess that was his highest rank. He's more known, I read about more him being called Captain Joseph Acklen, but he actually attained the rank of Colonel.
Yes, we're not quite sure how he attained that rank of Colonel, since he really was never in the military.
Wow.
As one northern newspaper reporter wrote during the Civil War, the South was just full of colonels. Everybody who was wealthy seemed to have the title of colonel.
Hey, I've got the title of colonel from the state of Tennessee. I mean, I get maybe it was something like that where the governor just gives you the piece of paper. Now, Adelicia was possibly the model for the character of Scarlett O'Hara in the classic movie Gone with the Wind. Can you provide our viewers with a brief introduction to the real Adelicia and who she was? It may not be possible to be brief, but
yes. Well, there certainly were a number of parallels between Adelicia and Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, details of Adelicia's life. Another historian has done a lot of research. There's no proof at all that Margaret Mitchell knew anything about Adelicia when she was writing gone with the wind. But Adelicia was married 3 times. Both of her first 2 husbands died. Joseph Acklen died during the Civil War from malaria.
Right.
She had 10 children, of which only 4 lived to reach adulthood. So she lost 6 of her 10 children. Her 3rd marriage to Dr. Cheatham was following the Civil War. She was able during the Civil War to move cotton out of off the Louisiana plantations to New Orleans, sell $250,000 of it in New Orleans, and then another $750,000 she got legally shipped through the federal blockade to Liverpool, England. So she had money following the war. She was a survivor really sort of a survivor, and she wrote in one letter to her brother that, I have done no more than any other woman would have done to provide for her family.
So she legally sold the cotton, although it says she smuggled it and got both the Union and Confederate armies to help her in the process. Now,
legally is she filled out the right paperwork.
Okay.
She paid the right fees to the tune of $5,000 in bribes. We know that because she claimed them on her taxes as other services rendered. So legally, it was shipped through the blockade. It just, I'm not sure how legally shipping was.
They were going to burn the cotton, right?
Yes, getting the cotton to New Orleans was a major. Joseph, in the letter that he wrote just 2 weeks before his death, that all we have left is the cotton in storage, for the cotton in fields will never be picked. There's no one left here on the property to pick it. I'm going to try to sell it to get home to you and the children at Belmont. South has no chance of winning the war now. We'll see me done with this whole business. And he did die 2 weeks later, and he was not able to sell the cotton. So she and another female cousin, she hired a gunboat, went down the Mississippi River.
That was Sarah Carter?
Sarah Ewing Carter Galt, who was also married 3 times like Adelicia.
Was that her best friend?
That was her cousin and best friend.
Okay.
But they were also cousins, distant cousins as well. And so...
and they went along the waterways to avoid troop
They went along the
interaction?
waterways because that was the best and safest way to travel.
Were they on a boat?
They were on a boat. She hired a gunboat.
Okay.
By Captain Leathers. Leathers was a major riverboat captain from Natchez, Mississippi, both before the war, during the war, and after the war. He was had one of the largest riverboat companies on the Mississippi River, so he accompanied her on this. But they went down there. She told Leonidas Polk, and of course family friend, that she was going to, she needed to sell the cotton or declare bankruptcy. And she told the federal troops that she needed to hire their wagons and mules to haul the cotton, and they allowed her to do so. And at one point, the Confederate soldiers even put a guard of soldiers on it to protect it, for they thought from the federal army.
Right.
But she got it all down to Mississippi. It got confiscated by the Confederacy. She had to go after it, got it all back, started shipping it to New Orleans. Her agent sold $250,000 of it in New Orleans, but she didn't think it was a good enough price, so she and Sarah leave Angola in the middle of the night to go down there, and it's then that she starts the negotiation with the federal authorities.
And Angola is her plantation in Louisiana that's now Angola Prison?
Correct. Angola was one of the 7 plantations that all are contiguous to each other, and all of that property makes up the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola.
Now, didn't she have to talk to a general? There was a general that was in charge of burning this cotton, or maybe it was a Confederate general that was related to her, right? That
was Leonidas Polk.
Okay.
Yes, Polk supposedly issued her an order to protect the cotton and to move the cotton down to the landing at Angola.
Right.
She was not able to produce that order when he moved to another theater. And so another Confederate officer asked for it. She was not able to produce it. She was actually put under house arrest for 3 days. And, but she still managed to get everything back, the cotton, the wagons, the mules.
She was very persuasive.
She was very, very persuasive.
And you think, and it wasn't just her beauty, I mean, she just had a personality where she could talk anybody into anything.
Her sister said she could talk a bird down out of a tree.
I don't doubt that. Now, I read somewhere that Belmont was actually Nashville's first zoo. They had some zoo animal type.
They did have a zoo
Creature-
here
creature
at
zoo?
Belmont. That was probably Colonel Acklen's doing, the first husband, the second husband's doing.
Right.
We know of alligators that were brought up from Louisiana. We know bear. Some bears were here. Aviary for the bird collection is still here on the property. Mountain lions supposedly were here. And then
The aviary doesn't have birds now, does
the
it?
aviary does not have birds now.
Okay.
It is on campus today, but there are no birds in it anymore.
And was there a bowling alley?
There were
Is that
two
true?
bowling alleys.
Two bowling alleys.
Two bowling
Wow.
alleys here. She tore the first one down in 1867. It was in a larger building that was bowling alley, 6 guest rooms and an art gallery. But she built the second bowling alley and billiards room elsewhere on the estate in 1867.
Cool. Adelicia was entertained in the courts of both Queen Victoria and Napoleon III. Now, you're responsible for acquiring a Queen Victoria portrait, which has become a centerpiece for the mansion. How did you pull that off? I mean, what did that
Well, that just took waiting for a while. We actually always knew the portrait existed. It was in the Valentine Museum in Richmond, Virginia. Portrait was inherited by Adelicia's middle son, William Acklen. He gave it to the Valentine family at some point later on in his life, and their collection, they were very early important Southern art collectors. Their collection became the Valentine Museum. It was hanging there in the Valentine home, and a number of years ago, they decided to reinterpret that house back to its early federal period and take down the Victorian parlor that was there, and the painting was hanging in that room. We did not know that at the time, so it got traded to the Historic Richmond Foundation in Richmond for a pair of tables they wanted that were original to its early house. The Historic Richmond Foundation then loaned the painting to the Richmond Women's Club and they hung it, and that's when we found out that the painting was no longer the Valentine. So we contacted them. They said, we want to sell the painting. It doesn't belong here, but we can't remove it now because they've just redecorated their entire lobby around this painting. So we'll have to wait a while. So several years later, I got the call and said, come get it.
Did Adelicia actually entertain royalty here? Were there any kings or queens that came?
No, she did not. There were no king. The closest thing to royalty that she did claim here was the grandson of the first emperor of Mexico, who was here, but no, there was no.
Now, there's a lot of statues around Belmont University now that are various animals and stuff. Is it true that all of those are actual animals that she either owned or were pets? No.
No.
Okay.
The animal statues here were all, purchased from, the animal statues are all cast iron. And so they were all purchased from, cast iron companies. Either they would have bought them at their showrooms in New York or New Orleans, or they would have bought them out of a catalog. And so they're all in the catalogs of the various things. So it's just like us going to a garden shop today and buying.
Yeah.
It was just very much the style of the period.
Yeah, I thought she had been criticized because she took trips to Europe and did a lot of shopping, and she kind of mixed and matched different kind of things that didn't necessarily go together according to, tradition. Is
Not
that true?
really.
No?
I think that criticism all comes
That's
from
not
our
really true.
20th and 21st century viewpoint.
Okay.
What she did in the 19th century was certainly not anything particularly fashion forward as far as interior decoration, but it was very, very typical of the period. She was doing nothing that other wealthy people in other areas of the country were doing. This, this whole idea of, colors and patterns and all of that type of stuff, we're so influenced by it today. They just had a whole different set of aesthetics in the 19th century.
Right, and they had some very nice aesthetics. Adelicia was deemed worldly by Nashville society in her mid-30s. She sought their approval and acceptance, and when asked about her extravagance, she retorted, "Extravagance is when one cannot afford it. I have never been extravagant." Did she ever gain their acceptance?
I never heard that quote before.
Okay.
I think I have read everything that she has written, but I have never heard that quote before. What she did write, what is the use of having beautiful things if you can't share them?
Right. Now,
In a way, no. She never really accepted. I think a lot of people she never accepted their. She never gained a lot of people's acceptance in Nashville, and I think part of it was she had money following the war, so that became, I think, a source of jealousy. I think to a lot of people. We don't really know all of the social intrigue that was going on in Nashville at the time.
do you think she was judged because she had more than one husband, or
No,
things
that was
like
very
that? No?
typical at the time.
Okay.
Her previous two husbands had died.
Right.
She married very respectable.
And her fiance died.
And her fiancé
when she
died.
was 17.
Yes.
And I heard it was right after, not long after, a couple of weeks maybe, when the painting in the Tennessee State Museum of her was, the portrait was painted. Do you know anything about that?
The painting of the portrait is a portrait of her that was done when she was engaged to Alfonso Gibbs. It was in the Gibbs family. It descended in the Gibbs family. She's wearing a black dress in that, and all of the fashion people, that studied fashion said you just don't wear a black dress. I mean, even for a wedding portrait, even in that period, so it was always very confusing as to why she was in a black dress at that right before that painting was painted. And it turned out when conservation of that painting was done, it was cleaned several years ago. There's a white dress underneath it. The Gibbs family, painted the dress black to show proper mourning for the son that had died, her fiancé.
So they painted over it,
They painted over the white dress.
but there's no photographs of it before it was...
No, this is
okay.
pre-photography.
Now, who was the slave Nurse Frances?
We don't know a whole lot about Frances. She appears in a couple of letters, and she appears in some of her son's writing. He wrote some very romanticized memoirs, and so Frances and Aggie are the two nurses that took care of the children that we know about. They were enslaved people. They lived here, but we don't know really. We think Frances may have been the mother of Eva Snowden Baker, who is actually an image of her has survived, but she's just mentioned in the letters, and that's all we know about her. We've not connected any legal documents with her to give us a little more insight.
Okay, was Adelicia a hero? Underground tunnels were allegedly discovered at Belmont, speculated to be used to hide slaves as part of the Underground Railroad. You've expressed doubts about this since Adelicia herself owned over 750 slaves, but weren't her plantations considered model plantations, and didn't they have a hospital to care for the slaves and stuff like that? Or
Yes, by 19th century standards, they were considered model. I would invite anyone who thinks there are tunnels here to go look at the parking garages that have been built underneath all the buildings on campus. Once you get down about 18 inches, you're in solid limestone.
right?
And so they would still be down there digging today if they were digging tunnels. We This house is sitting right on top of a limestone outcropping, and part of it is even a blue limestone, which is very, very hard. There are some tunnels underneath the sidewalks that run along the edge of the campus. Those were all put in when the steam lines were put in around 1905 and 1909 from the steam plant at the other end of the campus, and that's where all the...
Was that to heat the home, or?
That was to heat all of the buildings in this complex up here.
Yeah.
There are 5 buildings in this complex up here, built between this house, 1852, and then 1909. So those steam lines were put in to heat this whole complex of buildings.
Okay, Mark, you have a great, absolutely great quote. Choose your battles carefully. Showing up is 80% of the battle. You have to have a vision and keep pushing toward that vision no matter how impossible that seems. That's great advice. Can you add anything in the way of context to that? Is that how you got Queen Victoria?
Yes, I've got a lot of things. This house is, 10,900 square feet on the main level of the house, of living space of the house. Another 8,500 square feet in the basement. When I arrived, the previous directors had really been trying to, as we say in the country, eat the whole apple at one time. And so this house is too big to do that. We never have and probably never will have the economic resource to do that. So you start beating the apple one bite at a time. And so that is, and I have been very, very fortunate to be here now 31 years. And so you just keep plugging away at the projects and always have another project in mind. You have a vision to a final goal, but you just, even if it's just plugging away a little bit at the time, but just keep working at it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark Brown, for being our special guest on Mystery Us.
Thank you.